Hi everyone, welcome back. Before we get started with this weekly video, please make sure that you have first read the assignment sheet for Essay 2. So if you have not done that yet, go ahead and hit pause, head over to the new learning module on Blackboard and read the Essay 2 prompt, and then come back over here for the video where we will be discussing searching online and evaluating sources. Let's go. So I've provided links in the unit overview document to these websites if you would like to go back and take a closer look at them or perhaps read them more thoroughly. You have those links available for you. So this is from Purdue University's online writing lab, also known as the Purdue Owl. And it's a fabulous website with a lot of great information about working with sources. But today I wanted to specifically focus on searching online and then evaluating the sources you find once you've conducted those searches. So let me zoom in a bit so you can see a bit more what I'm talking about today. So when it comes to searching online, as you know very well by now, I'm sure, it can be very beneficial, but also very frustrating because the internet houses just an incredible amount of information, but how that information is sort of indexed or found can be difficult depending on your skill level. And there tends to be an assumption that students just know how to search online. And I've come to find out over the years that that's definitely not the case. For students as well as for myself, I'm also always working to improve my own ability to search online. So as it says right here, the internet is a complex and ever evolving place. So it's very important that we continue to evolve our own skills in terms of how we search online for finding sources. So I'm going to open up this PowerPoint that the Purdue Owl provides right here and quickly take us through it because it gives us some really great tips and tricks and guidelines for searching online. So for effective research, there's a couple aspects that you want to start with by keeping in mind. So you want to know the search tools that are available to you, a few of which I'll talk about today. You want to understand how those tools work. You want to know how to use the tools. And sometimes I have found students have a misperception of the best ways to search online, or maybe how searching online actually works. And then once you find the results, we need to know how to evaluate those results. So as I mentioned before, some characteristics of the internet are that it contains a large volume of information and it's very convenient. So it's sort of like the world's library, except as we can see here, it's potentially frustrating because there's no world librarian who's sort of assessing all these sources, who's looking at the validity and the reliability and the credibility of the sources, and then is arranging them in a way where they're easy to find. So the internet certainly doesn't contain all information, and it can be potentially quite frustrating to deal with. So when we're thinking about web versus print sources, with web sources, really anyone with access can publish. I've had my students publish web pages, and I'm talking about college students, I'm talking about university students. I'm also talking about the sixth graders that I taught years ago. So truly anyone can publish to the web. And of course, therefore, their author affiliation or how they're qualified to speak on the topic at hand, it could be unclear. They might not clearly identify any external information that they are using, and it could be biased or misleading. And we've certainly seen in the past decade some very serious consequences of biased and misleading information that spreads really rapidly online. And then finally, any publication info for that source might not be listed. So you might not know where it was published originally. Now, when we're talking about print sources, the process for getting something into a print source is a bit different, right? So there's typically an extensive publication process, whether we're talking about a newspaper, a magazine, a scholarly journal. There's some kind of process and vetting that happens with the information and the sources. It typically clearly indicates the author and their affiliation. So you know that this book was written by such and such a person who works for such and such a company or a university. Print sources do really well at clearly marking the outside source use or quotations that they're using. So plagiarism is not as much of an issue with print sources typically. Certainly print sources can be biased, definitely, but there's more of a review process in place. And let's remember that just because a source is biased doesn't mean that we cannot or should not use it, but we definitely want to be aware of that bias and how it might be impacting the information being presented from that source. And finally, something that's really nice when you have a book source is that the publication info is very clearly listed. So you can just open up to the publication information page and find out the year, the publisher, all that good stuff. Whereas, as you know, online, that information can be much more difficult to ascertain. So Purdue spends a little time talking about the visible web versus the invisible web. And if you visit their webpage, they have some links that you can look at to learn further about it. I don't talk too much about it in Comp 2, but there's sort of the upfront world of the internet where information is freely accessible and easy to find. But there's also another internet that we can search, the invisible web. And when I'm talking about the invisible web, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about the dark web. I'm not talking about the criminal underworld of the internet. What I'm talking about is content that's not found by general search engines. So for example, there are search engines that will go back and dig through internet sites that are no longer active. So you might not be able to find it from a regular search engine, but a specialized invisible web search engine could find it. So what are some web search tools that we use when we're researching? So of course we use search engines. Those are things like Google or Microsoft Edge or Bing or maybe any one of the search engines that people might use. And those list your results based on the keywords that you enter. There are also web directories and meta search engines. I don't worry about these too much in Comp 2. They're a little bit more advanced searching, but if you wanted to explore them, again, take a look at the OWLs page. So let's say we put in a topic, we choose our keywords, we go to Google, we enter our search terms, and then we get our results. Well, how are those results determined? So it's based on the amount of information on the site. It's also based on the number of sites that link to that site. So the more sites that link to your page, the higher it ends up in the search results because more people are sort of like using it and referencing it. It depends on the number of people who choose that link. Again, the usage of the site can impact it. The length of time that the site has been listed in the search engine database, and then the coding of the site, the search engine optimization of the site. And different search engines will return results in a different order. And often those results might include results from a paying advertiser. So oftentimes the first couple results on Google, which is one of the most popular search engines, are paid advertiser sites, right? Or the most popular sites, the ones that folks visit the most. But keep in mind, just because it's the most popular does not make it the best site. I'm just skipping over some of the practice things because we're not going to bother with that today. So when you're ready to search, and again, this is something that most of you have probably been doing kind of for your whole life right now, but I want to encourage you to really sharpen the skill set of how to conduct effective searches. So you want to consider keywords that apply to your topic. So for this essay assignment for the text wrestling analysis, that might include the author that you're writing about. It might include the title of the text that you're going to discuss. And it also might include the topics within that text that you're going to discuss. So you'll consider your keywords. You'll think about what kind of information you're going to need for essay 2 in this case. You'll consider the different angles that you might approach the topic from. And I strongly urge you to keep notes on this part of your process in case you need to come back and revisit anything. Now, when you're using search terms, don't just use that first, keyword or phrase that comes to mind. And I've often seen students inputting entire sentences into search engines, which is not correct. It's not an effective way to search. Okay, we want to try to use as few words as possible to get to our search results. So here's a couple things we might try. You might do multiple searches using different keyword variations. So for like the example they give us here, you might try dining hall, cafeteria, and campus food service if you were for some reason writing an essay about campus food. As you learn more about your topic, so in your case, maybe as you learn more about your author or the specific topic that you're going to write about, you might become more specific as you go along. So in the example they give us here, dining hall changes to Midwest University dining hall. That's going to yield probably better and more specific search results. Something else you might think about adding to your searching tool bag this semester is something called a Boolean operator, which are words that we can add to a search to make it more specific. So in other words, they help us narrow down our search results so we don't just get, every page on the internet for whatever we're looking for. So think about using these Boolean operators before you, which are the words and, or, and not. And there are many more like very advanced Boolean operators, but I think these are the most useful for students at our stage of the research process. So when you use the word and with your search results, it's going to find pages with all of those search terms used. So if you put in dining hall and student workers, it's going to give you all the results for both of those phrases, okay? If you put in or, it's going to find pages on the internet with at least one of those search terms included. So the first one using and gives you pages with both of those terms. If you use or, you're going to get pages that list at least one of the terms. So you might get dining hall, you might get or cafeteria, or you might get results with campus food service. Finally, if you use the word not, you are telling the search engine to exclude pages that include the second term. So in the example here, if I put in Henry VIII, not Shakespeare, I'm not going to get a bunch of results about the play called Henry VII that Shakespeare wrote. I think they meant Henry VIII there. You're only going to get probably results on the historical person, not including the Shakespeare side of it. So again, think about adding those to your kind of searching tool bag. If you use quotation marks, as it says at the top of the page here, that's going to return pages that have exact matches for your phrase. So if you just put dining hall into a search engine, it's going to return a lot of different variations where dining and hall might not be next to each other on the page, right? So if you put quotation marks around your search term, you're telling your search engine, I only want results that have these words in this exact order. So that can have a pretty big impact on your results as well. So once we've put in our keywords, we've had a chance to look through some results, that's when we need to evaluate what we have come up with. So some results are not going to be helpful. For example, they may have shown up on the wrong topic. There may not be enough information, or perhaps it's incorrect or outdated, or you have discovered that it's a shallow source or it's untrustworthy for some reason. You might also notice that it's the wrong tone for your project. You found something that's relevant, but it seems to be like a really opinionated, biased article when you just needed a basic overview. So maybe it's not appropriate for your project. We also want to have a clear idea of the type of content that we need. So what are we looking for when we search? Are we looking for a general overview? Are we looking for maybe different viewpoints about a debatable topic? Are we looking for in-depth exploration with data points? Okay, that's going to help determine which one of these search results will be the most useful for me. So if there's no precise formula for evaluating search results, that's okay. There are some things that we can consider. We might consider what is the purpose of this search result that we're looking at, who's responsible for the search result, who published it, and what is the impetus behind that. We might consider when the site was last updated and whether or not that information is corroborated in other places. And any one of these elements that you consider when you're evaluating those search results might be kind of a red flag or a green flag to say, oh, whoa, maybe this site is not the best, or yes, I'm going to use this site, it looks good. So as we're studying a site and trying to figure out its purpose, there are some elements that we might consider. So what's the tone and the language of the site? Is it appropriate for the topic at hand? Are there any assumptions or generalizations made about the topic that might not be accurate or fair? Is it a commercial or a non-commercial site? Is it attempting to sell you something or persuade you to do something? As it says next, is it advocating a particular opinion? And again, that doesn't mean that we can't necessarily use that site, but we need to know when someone's trying to influence us, right? You might also consider any copyright notices you can find on the site and links and sources that they cite. If they're telling you where they're finding their information, it's a good indication that they are a more reliable source. Now, as we're evaluating our search results, we can also keep in mind that domain name extensions are not a great way to tell whether or not a source is credible. Students often show up in my class and say, well, my teacher told me that .edu and .gov are the only reliable sources and .com you should never use. And I'm here to bust that bubble and tell you that is not the case at all. There are plenty of commercial sites that are reliable and provide excellent information. There are also plenty of sites that use domain names like .org whose sites are not reliable, right? As I mentioned before, I had my sixth graders publish web pages and they had .edu extensions in them. That doesn't mean we want to be citing from a 12-year-old in a college class, right? So don't rely only on that domain name extension. The next thing that Purdue Owl mentions is the visual aspect of the site. So do keep in mind, good design is not an indicator of reliable information. It is one indicator that it could be reliable, but it's not the only indicator. Again, on the other hand, a bad design is not necessarily an indicator of unreliable information. It might indicate an outdated website or one that's just like run by one person instead of an organization. But what's more important is the content of the site rather than how it appears. Now, if you're continually running into broken links, if you're unable to read the site, right? If it's so poorly organized that you can't understand it, then yes, I would say move on to the next one. But just because it's not the prettiest or most updated source you've ever looked at, doesn't mean that it's necessarily an unreliable source. Now, as you've noticed, I'm sure, when we search now, one of the first results that comes up almost every time is the Wikipedia article for it. Now, I'm here to say I love Wikipedia. I think it's an amazing, amazing website. And it's done a lot to kind of democratize the spread of information. But of course, there are also some problems with Wikipedia, right? It's often one of the first results because it's one of the first things we all look at, right? So as I mentioned before, the number of times people hit that site can push it up farther in the search results. That's one of the reasons Wikipedia is the first one. So some things that Wikipedia can be very useful for is getting an overview of a topic, maybe generating some new ideas about a topic, and finding links to sources that are referenced in the article. But in our class in English 1002, I want you to stay away from citing directly from Wikipedia because although it's kind of cool, it's actually very cool that it has so many editors and people that are able to add information. What that also means is that it's very easy for people to provide false information for many different purposes. So again, feel free to look at Wikipedia for a great overview and perhaps as a springboard to other more reliable sources, but please don't cite it in English 1002. And I would actually recommend not using it as a source in any college class. So this just shows you an example of the end of a Wikipedia page where it lists many of the sources that are referenced in the article, some of which are print sources, which maybe you might be able to go track down in a library. And then oftentimes there's actually links to other online sources as well. So it can be a good sort of start for your research, but again, it shouldn't be the end of your research. So they just end the slideshow by giving you some more resources and encouraging you to contact them with any questions that you might have. So that's what I have for you this week about searching online and evaluating sources. We will continue to talk about all these principles as the semester and our research process continues, especially the evaluating sources tidbit. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about how to look at those sources, where exactly to find certain types of information, and of course, how to cite all those sources. But let's leave that for future videos. And for now, if you have any questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye-bye.